every student in this country going to a public university or a public college could be given free tuition. Free tuition. The commercialization of childhood by these corporations has gotten completely out of hand, pumping sugar and fat into their little bodies through junk food ads on TV, over-medicating them. I say it's time to stop these corporate electronic child molesters and get them off the backs of these little children. The Green Party stands for the proposition that there are many things in this country that must never be for sale. Our democracy must never be for sale. Our government must never be for sale. Our environment must never be for sale. Our protective childhood should never be for sale. Our human genes should never be for sale. Corporations in our country were meant in the 19th century. The corporations were designed to be our servants, not our masters, and we got to go back to that original design. They are not persons. They are not real human beings. They should never have all the rights of real human beings, and they should never have the privileges and immunities to erect a corporate crime wave across this country that is not being subjected to prosecution. And I might say the mass media has reported regularly on corporate crime, fraud, and abuse. They have documented for all who care that more lives are lost, more injuries caused, more diseases promoted by corporate crime, fraud, and abuse, more property taken by far than street crime, bad as street crime is. Just think, 58,000 workers a year dying from occupational hazards, toxics, particulate, and trauma. Just think of the 65,000 people a year who die from air pollution, consequences, preventable, 80,000 just in hospitals from gross negligence, medical malpractice. How about the Dalcon Shield? How about the Pinto? How about the Corvair? How about the Firestone tires? How about all of these things that wrap up into a wave of preventable violence that's documented by the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post? Nothing is done about it. It's documented every week by the corporate crime reporter in Washington, D.C. Nothing is done about it because we have an underdeveloped democracy and an overdeveloped plutocracy and oligarchy. You want to know what money is like in Washington? How we have to clean up the corruption of money? Since 1997, the drug industry, lobbying Congress, has spent $237 million. One industry. You know who pays for that? In higher drug prices and prescription medicines. To non-voters, to the 51% of the eligible voters who sat it out in 1996, I say, please come in. Don't drop out of democracy. We need you. We even need your skepticism. We need your skeptical eye at all candidates on the ballot. That's why I am proposing for every line of every ballot a binding none of the above slot. So if you don't like the candidate, you can vote none of the above, and if none of the above wins, it cancels the election and orders new election. In the final analysis, my friends, in the final analysis, this election is about us. It's about our own sense of our own significance, our own resolve, our own determination, our own belief that we're going to carry that torch of justice as our forebears did for us. And it's also about future generations, once called posterity. It's about whether we're going to be able to look forward to our descendants and hand this world, this tormented world, over to them in much better shape, in much more democracy shape, in much more justice shape, so they'll look back on us they'll look back on us with kindness and praise instead of cursing us for our apathy or our narcissism or our refusal to stand up tall for justice and freedom in the world. Let not future generations look back on us and say that this was the last generation that refused to give up so little in order to achieve so much. We have so many assets, we have so many opportunities. We must move forward on our own backs, on our own muscles. We each must take hold of the wheel of justice with others and move it forward, because justice is the great work of human beings on earth, because justice is a prerequisite for freedom and liberty, because without justice, freedom cannot mean participation in power for the peoples of this world. There are many ways by which we can heighten our sense of civic motivation, our sense of being able to make a difference, our sense of our own significance in our democracy. One of the best ways we can highlight our civic motivation is to look back briefly at what our forebears did. Think of what must have been like being an anti-slavery abolitionist in Mississippi in 1836 or in Virginia in 1854. Think how lonely it must have been up against the giant cotton plantations. Think of what it must have been if they were ever caught. They would have been lynched, and they persisted and freed the slaves. How can we not be motivated by that? Remember also when women started canvassing and picketing to get the right to vote in the women's suffrage movement. Remember how many of those were arrested and kicked and dragged off to jail. For what? For wanting to have the right to vote. It wasn't just men, some men who were opposed to this. It was the liquor industry. It was the industrial corporations who didn't like women at that time organizing to end the brutalized child labor in those dungeon factories because the women believed the children belonged in school. It was the dominant business community. Again. And then in the brutalized mines and factories, it's hard now to appreciate just how brutal and cruel and depriving those working conditions were in those early factories and the mines and the foundries. In the coal mines alone, in the last 110 years, more coal miners have died from black lung disease, breathing the coal dust so thick you could almost cut it in those underground mines. And those who died from mine shaft collapses. More coal miners have died since 1890 than all the Americans killed in World War II. And that's just one industry. That's just one example of what working people in this country had to sacrifice. Not just their health, not just their safety, their very lives. And that's what built the trade union movement to put an end to this. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, was it? For workers to put their livelihood on the line at a time when there were no other jobs, when starvation was the only other option. There was no unemployment compensation, no Social Security, no disability payments, no workers' compensation. Think of the courage. Think of the determination. Think of how badly they wanted justice and take motivation from it. And think of the courage in the 20th century of those valiant civil rights workers in the South and elsewhere, facing sheriffs and fire hoses and bloodhounds in order for them to have equal opportunity and equal rights as human beings. Think of the courage it must have taken. Those are very, very high pressure times. High pressure times indeed.